Perhaps the best way to make sense of the story of Moses and the Exodus is to understand that there was constant movement between Canaan and Egypt in ancient times.
We can't be sure if there was one incident in the hundreds of years that Canaanites came down to Egypt that more or less represents what we have in the story of the Exodus. But the experience of going down to Exodus, of being involved in Egyptian civilization, of freeing themselves from the rule of the Pharaoh, happened again and again.
This is Mount Nebo in Jordan. From here, according to the Bible, Moses looked down on the promised land of Canaan, but died before he could enter it. It fell to Joshua, apparently, to lead the Israelites across the valley and to take Canaan by military conquest.
Then Joshua commanded the people, saying, "Within 3 days ye shall pass over this Jordan, to go in to possess the land which the Lord your God giveth you."
And it's a wonderful story, a great saga of war and conquest and bravery and miracles. And the question is, did it happen? Did it really happen the way it is described in the text of the Bible, of the book of Joshua?
The Bible says Joshua and the Israelites embarked on a 7-year campaign during which they conquered 30 Canaanite cities. Without doubt, the most famous story is that of Jericho.
The priests blew with the trumpets, and the people shouted with a great shout that the wall fell down flat, so that the people took the city.
In fact, distinguished British archaeologist Dame Kathleen Kenyon established 50 years ago that the walls of Jericho were destroyed many centuries before Joshua's time, probably by earthquakes, and that there was virtually nothing there in the conquest era.
The conclusion is, when we look at Jericho, Jericho was not inhabited in the 13th century BC probably. And then anyway, there are no fortifications. So where are the big walls of Jericho? I mean, you have this wonderful description of the people of Israel going, with the Ark of the Covenant, with the trumpets, and then the walls of Jericho collapse, in the 7th day. All of a sudden, there's nothing there. So this is not history in the simple sense, and the case of Jericho applies also for other places mentioned in the tradition of the conquest in the book of Joshua. Many of the cities mentioned were not inhabited at all in the land.
One of the cities mentioned in the Bible as having been conquered by Joshua and the Israelites was inhabited and was destroyed at the appropriate time. It's Hatzor in northern Israel, and Professor Amon Ben-Tor is in charge of excavating it.
Look at that. That's the destruction of the entire palace. If you look over there, we go towards the southern wall, we find ourselves in the throne room of the palace. So we are in the throne room. Look at the cracked basalt stones. Look at this. Normal heat doesn't do this, only a very, very intense fire. Look at what is happening on the walls. See the ashes, see the wood, signs of the timber here on the walls. Wherever you look, wherever you go, same signs of destruction. In the case of Hatzor, we see undoubtedly a violent destruction, like in no other place. And the question which faces us is, when did it happen and who did it? I believe that by now we can say rather safely that the destruction of Hatzor, the big final destruction of Hatzor, occurred sometime in the first half or towards the middle of the 13th century BC. And the question is, who is responsible?
The destruction of Hatzor coincides with a period of great turbulence in the Middle East. This is the temple of Medinet Habu in Egypt. At this time, mysterious people who came from the sea and are known as the Sea People attacked Egypt and many parts of the Egyptian Empire. They also attacked Canaan. Later, they settled on its coast and are known in the Bible as the Philistines.
There was a collapse of the Canaanite system and Egyptian administration in Canaan. It didn't come, in one overnight. It was a long process, which probably took almost a century, from the beginning, from the collapse of the first cities to the later ones. And much of it must have been done, or must have been related to the assault of the Sea People in several waves, possibly, on the coasts of Canaan. So slowly by slowly, the cities of Canaan disappeared. Some of them must have been destroyed by Sea People in the 12th century. Some of them could have been destroyed by reaction of Egypt. Some of them could have been destroyed by rivalry between fighting each other. Some of them could have been taken by those groups on the margin of the Canaanite society.
Professor Ben-Tor believes that such a group did destroy Hatzor, and that since the Bible names them as the Israelites, why disbelieve it?
Nowhere in any document in Egypt does it say that the Egyptians destroyed Hatzor. So I think we can rule out the Egyptians. Let's go back to the Canaanite city-states. Which one of the Canaanite city-states was big enough to compete with Hatzor? Which one could have destroyed Hatzor? I don't know of any such city-state. I'll rule them out. Let's go to the Sea People. They have a very, very distinct pottery. We did not find even one shirt which is Philistine. Not one. Add to this the fact that it is too far inland. The Sea People were coastal. This is where their interests were. Not so far inland as Hatzor. I'd also rule them out. It turns out that we are left with those enigmatic Israelites or proto-Israelites. They were the ones responsible for Hatzor, and that the traditions that are preserved hundreds of years later in the book of Joshua have a nucleus in the reality of the destruction of Hatzor.
So it might have been the early Israelites who destroyed Hatzor. But that one fact hardly vindicates the whole Old Testament account of the conquest. So why did the story come to be composed in this form?
The way the story is written, putting the conquest of the Promised Land into a single military campaign with a unified strategy to conquer the center of the country, the north and the south, is clearly a later attempt to explain how the Israelites conquered the Promised Land.